jealous for me.
I'm a little nervous. It's going to be a challenge, but I believe God's in it. Here it goes.
The weight of his wind and mercy. When all of a sudden I am unaware of these.
How would I describe myself? Let's see. Seeker, believer, overcomer. Somebody whose life has been radically changed and transformed and directed by the power of love. This is the story of how I got there. When I was 11 years old, I asked my parents if they would bring me to church, and I went there every Sunday by myself until I left home for college. It was pretty intimidating to be a small kid on my own in a big church, but I wanted to be near God. Somehow, I just knew He was good. I think I believed that even before I actually experienced it for myself. Anyway, my parents were going through a messy divorce, and church was a place to be around people. I wanted comfort, belonging, affection. That's a vulnerable position to be in as a child, especially when your parents are preoccupied with their own pain. I was an easy target, easy prey. The pastor of that church was my uncle by marriage, a man of the cloth, but not a man of God, with a history of affairs and other indiscretions, and eventually he raped and molested me. I'm pretty sure I was not the only one, but there was no one I could tell. And after I was molested a second time by a family friend, I began a downward spiral into depression, anxiety, and suicidal thinking. I was consumed by shame, physically sick much of the time, and well on my way to developing a true mental illness. No one noticed. No one cared. I felt like an orphan in my own home. I met Jesus when I was 15 at a Christian summer camp, and I was saved. I began to understand a little more about God's love and His plan for me, and tiny seeds of hope and faith were planted. At the same time I met Jesus, I met the boy I would eventually marry, and in a way, I was saved a second time. He was the kindest, gentlest, safest person I had ever known, and he loved me more than I ever knew it was possible to love anyone. He was my first encounter with radical love. And in the newfound safety and security of that love, I could no longer keep the pain hidden. I began to fall apart. After we married, we found a great church, and I began to learn about Jesus for real. More seeds of hope and faith were planted. I was watching His love in action in the people around me. It was hard to receive, though, because I hated myself and everything about me. I had no real friends because I expected to be hurt and let down. Why get your hopes up if people are just going to leave you anyway? I remember this one desperate night when I parked my car in an empty lot, alone and in the dark. I cried and screamed and kicked at the doors of the car, fighting the familiar urge to end my life because I could not take the pain anymore, and I knew in my heart that no person could give me everything I needed to get better. I had reached the end of myself that night. There was no further I could fall. I cried and cried and cried until I was hoarse and I had no tears left. But in my exhaustion, a peace came over me, and I made a deal with God. It would be just Him and me, and I would trust Him for my healing above anyone else. I promised I wouldn't give up on Him if He didn't give up on me. So I didn't, and He didn't. That covenant in the car was a significant turning point in my journey because I chose to submit everything I had, my life, my shame, my unanswered questions, any hope I had for wholeness, to God alone. It was a choice to trust in His goodness. a choice to believe His words over my thoughts, a choice to obey His leading over my own. I wasn't completely healed all at once, but little by little, layer by layer, my brokenness began to fall away. Crippling depression evaporated, and it never returned. The lifting of that depression opened a door to more hope and more faith. The less I'd felt defined by my brokenness, the more I longed to discover who I really was, who God intended me to be. One of the things I knew for sure that I was meant to be was a mother, an adoptive mother. From one miracle birth to 4 miracle adoptions, I became the mother of 5 children, 3 different races from 3 different continents. How incredible it was that God would redeem and restore what had been lost in my life in this way, that the one who grew up lonely and an orphan in spirit was now the adopter of orphans herself. God is so good. He began to teach me intensively about radical love and used the language and experience of adoption to minister His love and truth to my heart. He brought a friend into my life that loved me like no one else I had ever met. She challenged me to open my heart and to love her unreservedly, but without guarantees that she would be there with me forever. She wasn't an American citizen, and I knew she would move away eventually. But I also knew that God was inviting me into something big and deep and life-transforming. So I made a covenant with her to love her radically as she had loved me. That choice opened a door to trusting more people. Trusting more people opened a door to receiving more of God's love and healing through them. My life was changing. I was changing. I was becoming more and more who God made me to be. That did not go unchallenged, though. Not only did my friend eventually move away, but she died. I could still hardly get out those words. She's gone, and it is the most profound loss I have ever experienced. But radical love did not die with her. To be honest, I was so afraid that it had, or at least my experience of it. But God is good, and He does not leave us as orphans. He will come to us, and He has. He's invited me to trust Him more, to go deeper with Him, with others, to keep my heart open. He's rewarded my obedience with sacramental, covenantal relationships I never would have dared to ask for. Through my walk of obedient vulnerability in pursuit of His love, I have experienced joy in the face of grief and pain, faith that can overcome fear, and confidence in God's overwhelming goodness that does not depend on circumstance. Radical, revolutionary love has become my mission, my goal, my song. It has changed me, transformed me, and it will guide and direct my way forward. I don't exactly know how or where, but I have a feeling that love will find a way.
Oh, how He loves us. Oh, how He loves us. Oh,
So this is me. It's a work in progress, but I think I'm pretty happy with it. To be continued.